Well, hello there, my friends, and welcome into another episode of the Web Design MBA podcast. Hey, I hope this one finds you doing well. We are closely approaching the Christmas season as I'm recording this episode, and I am getting excited. I mean, we're not approaching the Christmas season, we're approaching Christmas. We are in the Christmas season. I mean, we are full swing Christmas music during the workday here, and it's exciting. I'm pumped about it. However, this year, I have some bad news. And that's what we're going to talk about on this episode of the podcast. Now, I promised from the very beginning that I would always be real, that I would never come onto this podcast and hide anything from you, pretend that I was bigger, better, greater, than I am. I've always said that I'm in the trenches. I plan to remain in the trenches, and it's just my style. I think if I were to ever just give up owning the web design agency one day, it would not be to go into teaching web design full time. I mean, maybe after I've done it for 30 years or something, but I'm not even sure that web design is a viable industry in 30 years, given the rise of AI and robotics. So, I mean, for me, it's all about being real. And I've got to be real with you. Something happened that I knew was coming, but I didn't know exactly when it was coming. And it came at kind of a bad time, not going to lie. And I'm going to share as much detail as I reasonably can with you about that today. This is a real episode. I promised I would always be real. I'd always be in the trenches, the goods, the bads, the ups, the downs. They're all important to helping you know what to expect as you try to build a successful web design business. And this episode is going to be a real one. They're all real, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, the bad news along with the good. Okay. So here's what happened. I lost my biggest client. And when I say they were my biggest client, I mean they were too big. They took up about a third of my income. And relatively speaking, the workload that we did for them, because it was a value arrangement. The workload that we did for them was very light. Okay, and even doing the light amount of work that we did, it had enough value to the organization to be worth justifying the price that we charged. And in other words, the work that we did was high leverage. So it required low man hours, but it was leveraged high, that it created great results for the client. They were happy with it. This was a marketing focused arrangement that came with the management of their website as well. And they were a great client for many years. And basically what happened is they were acquired by another company, by a parent company. And we were with them while they were affiliated, just like as an affiliate of that company, for probably a year and a half, 2 years. And then the merger came to a completion in this November, and along with that merger, my contract. I'm pleased to say that I did retain them as a client, and they are staying with us for website management, but extremely reduced scope of work. Essentially, we're not doing what we were doing for them before, and so they are gone. This is our first month without having their income. And I got to tell you, when it first happened, it was a little scary. The day before that happened, another client, again, with an expected end, but who had a fairly significant retainer with us, also dropped off. Okay. And again, just another great client, paid on time, great working relationship. Again, there's no problems, nobody's mad, no burned bridges, no hard feelings, none of that, just business. But, I lost a pretty significant retainer one day, and then an even more significant retainer literally the next day. And here I am. I am surviving. I'm here. We're still talking. My business is not going under. My bills are paid. My employees, although they're working a little bit less, we're going to talk about that, are still working, and we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Why are we going to be okay? Well, largely in part to what I've tried to teach you here on this podcast, which is to build a recurring revenue-based agency, okay, a subscription web design-based agency. Now, I want to kind of tell you a little bit about what we did. So what led to this situation, what led to this one client having so much money tied up in them, and then give you just, again, some of the lessons that I've learned in this scenario. Okay. So, believe it or not, the path to this client becoming such a significant portion of our income was fairly unexpected as well. What happened is that I wanted to create a marketing offer, a unique marketing offer that would be unique to our company and have a certain few steps in the process that we felt confident that we could get great results on our clients for. And we did that. And what we did was we bundled it all together. Rather than saying, okay, you got this line item, this line item, this line item, and this line item that they're paying a certain amount of money for, we decided to make it all in one, all inclusive, and it was a mid four figure. We'll just say that a mid four figure deal, essentially. Okay, and it included all the marketing for this company. That we were going to be doing, all the digital marketing, okay, other than they handled like some, a little bit of Facebook advertising and stuff like that, but anything related to the website, email marketing, online reviews, we did all of those things. And an obvious pro to that was that for many years, we had an incredible source of income and a great working relationship. I mean, you can't trade those things, right? They were amazing. I mean, you're in business to have cool happenings like that, cool clients like that, right? But of course, there is always the liability of having too many eggs in one basket, right? Of having one client be too big of a source of income. One of my favorite thoughts around this actually comes from the book. I'm not sure if it's in the book Rework. I think it is, but the thought definitely comes from Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansen, who are the authors of that book and the owners of Basecamp. And essentially what they mention is not having a company that supports and serves everyone. For example, they made a decision a while ago that they weren't going to be able to have a client who could pay them too much money. Because if you had a customer, not a client, a customer in this case, if you had a customer who if you had per seat pricing and you have one customer who's got 1,000 seats and everybody else has nothing else, well, essentially you're just working for that one customer, right? Everyone else is like a solopreneur, like, 5-10 seats at most. Then you got this one behemoth that's 1,000. Well, that makes up too big of a risk, because essentially they would be working for that client. They would feel beholden to that client to actually create the software, to mold the software to be more friendly to them instead of to all the other users who needed it. And the needs of the Fortune 500 are just not the same as the Fortune 5 million. Okay. And so they decided, look, no one customer can pay us more than this amount. And one specific thing, I didn't even write it down here, but one specific thing that I did take away from this is I sort of decided that I wanted my average client, okay, to be around $800 a month, something like that. I wanted it to average out $600 to $800 a month, because anytime a client of that much money, frankly, comes in, it's a pretty good boost. Right? But it's not catastrophic when that client leaves either, because clients do leave eventually. Okay. So you want to ideally find a number for you that it's a pretty good boost to your monthly top line and can help your bottom line as well. But then when they leave, it doesn't affect your bottom line too much. Okay. I think that is going to be a huge piece of this. And it's something that I learned because I recognized obviously for a while now that this one client was too big. And so I've been thinking of ways to creatively solve this going forward. And that is one of them for sure. To shoot for having an average of about $700 or $800 per client. Right now, again, that means you're going to have some that are maybe $1,200 and maybe some that are $300 and maybe a couple $200 ones and maybe a few $2,000 ones or something like that. Right. But you're going to try to land in that 600 to 800 range. At least that's what I decided. You may decide something entirely different. Okay. So that's kind of where we went with it. And look, again, there are things that you can control in business, but ultimately, you can't control someone else's business. In my case, this company was acquired and my service offering no longer became relevant to their business. And we have to realize that that's going to happen. Sometimes your service offering is no longer relevant to a business. I know there's a big complaint in web design circles sometimes around, a marketing agency came in and poached my client. Okay. And Sure. I get it. We can be a little anal about that sometimes. We'd be like, well, a marketing agency is not going to care as much or do nearly as good a job as I will as a professional web designer on the website. For them, the website is just a tool that makes them more money. But that's what a website is, right? I mean, a website ultimately is just a tool. I think sometimes we get too romantic about websites, right? I'm not saying you have to become a marketing agency. Sure. You can become a great website design or development practitioner and pride yourself on that. That's fine. But if you're going to do that, you must realize something. You must realize that there may come a time when your service offering is no longer relevant. And when that happens, you shouldn't complain about it. You should be okay with it. You should make provision for it. Be prepared for it. Make sure that the customer has everything they need to have whenever they take over that website or give it to their marketing agency or whatever. Now, if you want to add some marketing offerings into your mix, then please do. I'm just saying, you certainly don't have to do that, and you may choose not to do that. But if you choose not to do that, realize that you just can't infinitely grow and scale with these clients. Sometimes, at some point, your service offering is going to be no longer relevant. And you know what? You should be proud. Let me just say this, and I want you to really feel this. You should be proud that your business was the right fit at the right time for this client. It got them where they needed to go, and now they can move on to bigger and better things unencumbered by the past, right? I think of that company, and I'm not going to say their name or who they are or what they do. I think of the company that left literally the day before. And again, good working relationship. Every now and then we do some one-off work for them, so it's totally fine. Like I said, no burned bridges here. But when they came to us, they were trying to build a membership site on Squarespace. I won't go into the story. Suffice it to say, that didn't work so well. Their eventual goal was to build a standalone SaaS application, custom development. Okay, but in the middle, in order to prove the case to their investors, they needed to have a WordPress base set up that they would have more control over using MemberPress. And that's where we came in. And for, I would say 6 months, we came in, we were the perfect fit to handle that season of life for that business. They got the data they needed thanks to the work we did, and they graduated and moved on. And am I sad to have lost their retainer? Sure. But am I happy for them as a company and proud of them as a company? Yeah. Do I think that we'll have business in the future from referrals from how we handled ourselves working with that company? I absolutely do. And it's a great looking little tool on our resume. Okay. So look, ultimately you just have to be okay with the fact that sometimes people leave. Sometimes people move on. Your goal should be that when people leave, it's not because they're frustrated with you or unhappy with your service. Your goal should be to foster the relationship to the point where they're no longer a great fit for you. And then move on with your head held high and proud of the work that you did together. In fact, now this is going to be real counterintuitive to a lot of online business advice, but I'm in the real world here, right? I'm not the marketer selling just selling the course. Like I'm not a course creator selling courses on how to be a course creator, right? I'm doing the thing here, okay? And I'm telling you, when you do the thing, it's better, in my opinion, it's better for you to determine what that cutoff is. What is that range? That range where you are stellar, right? Any less than this or below this line, you don't do so hot. Above this line, you don't do so hot. You don't want to go there. You don't want to touch whatever it is, SEO, ads, whatever. Like, find that sweet spot where you are. Own that sweet spot and say, you know what? For as long as you're with me, we're going to deliver excellence in this sweet spot. And then when you need to move on, we're going to make sure you have everything you need to transition successfully to be able to do that. I would highly recommend you do that. I know that's not very popular in grow, go, online business advice, but in the real world of business, it's how it works. So prepare for it. Okay, here are a few things that I wrote down to be aware of as you're thinking through this, and something that I have learned, again, as I lost my biggest client. Okay, some lessons to help you maybe not be in the same scenario as me when you do lose a client. Okay, so be aware of putting too many eggs in one basket. All right, again, one customer paying you an outsized amount of money is okay for a period of time. In fact, if it weren't for that scenario, hear me. If it weren't for that scenario with a different customer, in this case, it was a white label client of mine. If it weren't for that scenario, I would have not been able to go full time in my business when I did in 2021. Now, I've been very clear about that in the past. I've been clear about the fact that I had one client, a white label client, who made up, at the time I left my job in 2021, it was a very reliable gig, and they made up about half of my income. Now, I'm good friends with the owner of that business still today. We had breakfast this morning, but we no longer do regular work for them. The one-off occasional thing, fine. Again, they moved on. They had other needs. They switched, they pivoted a little bit from the kind of work that they were offering. Our work no longer became relevant. Guess what? We kept the relationship alive. Okay, so for a period of time, it can make sense, especially if you're transitioning out of a full-time job, to have eggs in to have more eggs in a basket maybe than you would normally want to. But don't make that the norm. It shouldn't stay that way for long, okay? Here's another thing. Keep lots of data on hand to argue your value, okay? Unfortunately, in this scenario, and again, it was not entirely our fault. I will say there's a little bit of shared blame there, and the story is just way too long to go into. But between me and this client, there was never really a good mutual understanding of our effectiveness in a very data-driven way. Okay. There was definitely signs of our effectiveness, big signs based on the work that we were doing, but they were not like hard data points. And a lot of times when you're dealing with a company like big enough to be, bought out by another company, that's a consideration. And so I would have felt maybe a little bit more compelled to argue my case that they should continue paying us if I had some data showing specifically that the work that we were doing was generating a specific number of results, and maybe they would have wanted to stay. I didn't even argue that case at all, okay? I politely let them know that if the parent company wanted any work along these same lines, that I would be honored to have a chance to bid for that work. But I know that they're a big company. They do a lot of stuff internally. They're not working with external agencies, okay? So, what can I say? I think that having the max amount of data is important. And it's something that I did not do in this case that I think in the future would be wise to do. And I think you should consider doing it as well, especially if you're doing marketing. If you're doing marketing and you have lots of data to support your case and you have a customer who wants to leave, maybe you should be ready with that data to say, hey, just so you know, when you leave, this is what you're losing. I think that might be a interesting path to at least have an option for. All right, the next thing is to have a fallback plan of sorts. In other words, when this happens, what is your plan? Not if, when. When this happens, what is your plan to be able to make some extra money to fill in these gaps? Or what is your plan to spread the workload out if you have a team between certain people? Again, for me, and I'm going to talk about this more in a minute, for me, I had to become more involved in the design and development than I necessarily want to be. And there's only one or two other times where I've had to do that in the life of my business once I started hiring a team. But be ready for that, okay? Have a fallback plan. What is that plan? How are you going to like readjust your finances? I know exactly what I had to do when I had to do it, okay? Have a fallback plan to make sure that you've got the money worked out and adjusted in such a way that you can continue to make it work even after you lose a client that you didn't want to lose. Okay. Another thing that I talked about a little bit was consider itemizing over packaging. Okay. Consider itemizing so that you can say, hey, you know what? Instead of leaving altogether, why don't we consider, like, if you got these other, I don't know, another company maybe that you're going to work with on these other services, hey, we can still do this, this, and this for you. And here's, again, that data. Here's the data on how valuable the service was. And maybe you'd let us keep doing that. Right. So if you can itemize instead of packaging it all up in one go, that may be more advantageous for you, because then rather than just cutting off the big number, maybe you just cut off one or two of the other numbers, and then you don't lose quite as much in the transfer. Okay. And again, I know these are very specific scenarios, but it's like if that's what you're doing, if the problem is that there's some services that they're just going to cut off all these services from you. Well, if you have it set up to where they're cutting off some services, but not all services, then that may work out better. And maybe that's not the case for your business at all, but maybe it is. And if it is, hopefully you find that to be valuable advice. I definitely regret having this all packaged up as one thing together, so it seemed like a package deal, whereas there was actually individual elements that I could have itemized out. It also, in some cases, can make it easier to sell, but that's a conversation for a different day. And lastly, here, in terms of the things to be aware of, is like, be ready to roll up your sleeves. Like, if you are in a scenario where you're already doing all the work, then you're basically going to need to make sure that your expenses and your finances are in check. If you're in sort of the scaling phase in the life of your business, as I am, then and I should say specifically that that's your desire, then you may be going back to for a season of time where you're rolling up your sleeves, and you're getting into the nitty gritty and doing more of the detail work that you weren't doing for a while. And that's certainly true in this case. I've got my team working on certain projects, and then I am actually rolling up my sleeves and doing a little bit more of the work on the other, so that I don't have to pay them. Because frankly, once you have a team, payroll makes up most of your expenses. And I love my team. I am doing my best by them. I'm keeping them as busy as I can possibly afford to keep them. And I am working on the other items myself. And actually, don't tell anybody, but I'm kind of enjoying it. I'm kind of enjoying a little bit being back into the button turning and installing plugins and stuff like that, like configuring things. And it's actually, it's quite fun. And when you go actually for a period of time without doing that, you sort of forget how much you miss it, and you enjoy the work. So it's okay to dive back in, even if you're in that scaling phase. Look, do you have any idea how many billionaires and millionaires went bankrupt multiple times, lost everything multiple times? I mean, my business has not failed. Right? Let me just say that again. My business has not failed. Your business doesn't have to fail. You can set your business up in such a way that it can weather hard times. It can weather losing your biggest client. And what a cool thing. But you got to set it up the right way. You got to have that recurring income, frankly. You got to have a plan. You got to have systems. You got to have an understanding of what's happening in the financials of your business. The most important thing, I think, is when, no matter who you're working with or what you're doing, you have got to maintain that relationship. Look, me and this client continue to be on great terms, and they're still a client. I'm not mad at them. They're not mad at me. No bridge burning. We still work with them, just in a little different capacity. Okay. But I'm trying to share with you the lessons from the financial differential that there is, because there's a huge financial difference in what we're doing now versus what we're doing before. And so even though they're still a client, I technically didn't lose my biggest client, but I for sure lost my my biggest single source of income from a client. And I think there's some stuff that you can learn from this. And I really hope that in this 25 minutes here that we've spent together, roughly, that you've learned something. useful that you can take. So think about how to spread out your risk with your service offerings. That's the big takeaway. You have to make sure that at no one point do you have a single point of failure for your business. Okay. Again, work on that average order value for your company, right? That average value of that customer, and make sure that they line up with your goals and don't put you in a position where you lose a third or half of your income in one fell swoop. I hope this has been a little bit helpful for you. Again, check out all of our resources at webdesignmba.com. If you'd like some personalized help, I would love to coach you. I have been enjoying working with a few coaching clients in this season of life, one-on-one. I've got some packages available for that. I'd be honored to talk to you about. You can go to my website and find all the information there for that, or just email me, steve@northmaxservices.com. We can set up a chat, and I'd love to talk with you about what that coaching might look like. Still working on putting together the future of what this program might look like. And, I'm going to have some announcements on that coming pretty soon, I think, but we'll see what we got. And I'm still working on it. I want to make sure that we do something cool for you guys. Okay, so I hope this has been useful in the meantime, and you guys have a wonderful Christmas season. We are going to have a few more episodes this month, and so I'm excited to see what happens. God bless you guys. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.